So for those who would like to know in full detail about how this vaporize mechanic works, in terms of against high stagger resistance or shielded enemies, we would usually face the issue of trying to vaporize these enemies in the normal traditional way of how we vaporize them, through doing Bennett first and then Mona and then Bennett again. However, in this concept of high resistance enemies or shielded enemies, we don't need to do that. All we need to do is ensure that pyro constantly being applied onto the enemy until the enemy's stagger resistance goes down and takes the vaporize hit, or their shield goes down and then they take the vaporize hit. In this case, this would mean that you can just apply the Mona's elemental burst on the enemies right away, and applying this gives you basically the additional aspect of Omen extension as well. The Omen is applied, but the timer hasn't started, so therefore we are getting that free extension because these enemies won't get staggered or they have a shield. So during that time you can apply Bennett's ult and then apply some form of swirl, pyro infused swirl onto the enemy, and then by the time their resistance goes down or their shield goes down, Mona's vaporized bubble will basically be ready at that time. To simplify it, basically that 2 seconds will already be done, and by the time their resistance goes down or their shield goes down, they will take the proper Mona Vaporize hit from that. This is essentially quite good for future content to come, when we do come across enemies similar to these enemies where they apply a shield onto themselves or have a very high stagger resistance from Mona's elemental burst. We can just simply follow this method and really not have to worry as much anymore, because we are starting to see more mobs that have some form of a shield or more stagger resistance. And I think it's actually quite important that we understand this aspect, that we don't need to follow the traditional method of vaporizing enemies. So what you see in my gameplay is that I technically just go straight up to the enemy and Mona burst them, and followed from that I put down Bennett's ult. Bennett's ult damage itself actually is influenced by the Omen's damage boost, so it actually boosted Bennett's damage. As well as that, I moved straight to Jean. What Jean does is that she will constantly apply pyro infused swirl to enemies, because of the fact that she is getting self-inflicted by Bennett's pyro, and then she will push that onto enemies themselves. She will constantly inflict pyro onto enemies, which is quite good. As well as that, her initial elemental burst damage will also take the effect under Bennett's buff and Mona's Omen extension damage boost. Not only you're slotting in extra damage onto high stagger resistance enemies, but you're also gonna get almost a guaranteed vaporized Mona damage as well along with it, doing actually more additional damage than the original traditional method on standard enemies. Now for standard enemies you can't really do this, because you will prematurely burst the bubble and you won't even get the proper vaporize hits. But for these special types of enemies that have high stagger resistance or have shields, we can take full advantage of this mech and it works absolutely fine, and there is plenty of other creative approaches that you could do with it. So it's actually quite a fun mech around this, and this will definitely help you just get through these shielded or high stagger resistance mobs with a lot quicker now, where you can ignore it. Though bear in mind that they do have some shape or form where their stagger resistance can be quite low in some of their attack cycles. I'm not 100% sure exactly where are these aspects. If you're just planning to just run up to them and do what I do, literally they probably just already initially start with very high stagger resistance, so this combo would work. But if it's during a middle of a fight or something, I'm not entirely certain if that would actually work. Hopefully you've learned something in this video, and hopefully this kind of just roughly explains how this all works.